Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo, as in Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo.
This is a case about when inspectors go onto fishing boats to monitor the catch, whether the owners of those boats can be required to pay for the costs of those monitors.
Nicholas Bagley is a law professor at the University of Michigan. Even though this case is about fishing, the central question the court is asking is whether to overturn or clarify the 1984 decision in Chevron versus the National Resources Defense Council, which created what's now known as the Chevron Doctrine.
And under the Chevron Doctrine, the courts are going to give the agencies the benefit of the doubt when they go about interpreting the statutes that they administer.
When the law is unclear on a specific detail, federal agencies usually issue a rule or guidance about it. The Chevron Doctrine instructs courts to defer to the agencies, so long as that guidance is reasonable. Thomas Merrill is a law professor at Columbia and wrote a book on this.
The Chevron Doctrine, for better or worse, has been sort of identified by the conservatives that think that, the administrative state is out of control as being at least a symbolic, if not an actual vehicle in which this sort of power transfer has taken place.
Several cases seeking to challenge this policy have been working their way through the courts. This Loper Bright case about fishing regulations is where the court will finally take a look. Leah Dempsey is a lawyer with the firm Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck and says if Chevron does get overturned,
there would probably be a lot more legal challenges to agency actions, knowing that they don't necessarily have the Chevron doctrine to fall back on.
And she says Congress would have to be a lot more intentional in the way it writes laws. In Washington, I'm Kimberly Adams for Marketplace.
Wall Street to start the week, the month, and the last quarter of the year. A little up and a little down. We'll have the details when we do the numbers. We will, the National Retail Federation tells us, spend better than $12 billion on Halloween this year. There will be a couple of billion in candy in there, I'm sure. Parties and house decorations as well. But Halloween is also one of those ultimate tests of the supply chain. The latest and most popular costumes have to be delivered just in time, more often than not, having been ordered just at the last minute. Spoiler alert, the supply chain horror story isn't over just yet. Marketplace's Sabri Benishore has that one.
Halloween is actually a pretty scary holiday for retailers because they have to plan ahead, but it's also sometimes kind of impossible for them to plan ahead.
Most of the decisions that have to be made about Halloween need to be made 18 months, maybe 2 years in advance.
Julie Niederhoff is associate professor at Syracuse University's Whitman School of Management. What costumes and decorations and candy to make, how much to make, what raw materials you might need, how and when to ship them over.
Best case scenario, it has to be made 6 to 8 months in advance.
The problem is Halloween is driven by trends. You don't always know what people are going to want to dress up as that far in advance. 2021 was a perfect example when Squid Game came out just a month and a half before Halloween.
Everybody wanted Squid Game costumes and Squid Game designs, but that was not on anybody's production planning.
I didn't get my Squid Game mask in time and had to dress up as a monkey instead. Anyway, this year it appears retailers were making decisions extra early. Businesses have been sourcing Halloween costumes and decor earlier and earlier since 2019, according to search data from digital manufacturing marketplace Xometry. Randy Altshuler is CEO.
People were haunted by the lessons and the problems that they saw. COVID, now you're seeing more problems related to climate change and extreme weather that's also disrupting supply chains right here in the United States. So I think just with all that on their mind, people are creating resilience.
According to S&P Global, Halloween products were shipped earlier this year, too, by about a month, partly because shipping times are still not back to pre-pandemic levels. And there were new worries this year. Chris Tang is a professor at UCLA's Anderson School of Management.
They concern potential strikes of truck drivers or the railroad or the port. So therefore, a lot of companies would like to play safe. They try to place the order earlier.
So, if you want to dress up as something truly scary for Halloween, try going as a supply chain. In New York, I'm Sabri Ben-Achour for Marketplace.
I don't actually know whether David Brancaccio is a Halloween dress-up guy or not. But you know what? It's radio, so it doesn't matter. You should listen to his program, Marketplace Morning Report. Everything you need to know to start your business day. The last couple of years have been challenging for the Chinese economy. More challenging, to be clear, than they have been for the rest of the world. We all had the pandemic. China had zero COVID. China also has some structural issues that have landed Beijing with a real estate slump, low growth, and high unemployment. Also, whether cause or effect, there's a widespread lack of confidence among businesses and consumers alike over there. Marketplace's Jennifer Peck has more now from Shanghai.
Recently, I got a few messages from someone I'd met a few times before.
Hey, you in town?
Yup.
Can we talk?
We meet somewhere outdoors where there's less chance of the conversation being monitored.
现在可以吗?
He's in his 30s. I'm calling him Jim, not his real name. Because Jim says he wants to run, a popular term meaning to relocate abroad. He could be accused of being unpatriotic or worse by the police.
为什么要走呢? 其实
Why am I leaving, he says? Because the pandemic changed me. Jim says when he lived in the countryside, he longed to come here, to Shanghai. Before the pandemic, he says the Shanghai cops were polite. It was a place you could go about your life without feeling the heavy hand of the communist government. But he says the 2022 lockdown changed everything. 25 million Shanghai residents were suddenly forced to stay home. Our communist neighborhood committees had final say over our daily lives. Suddenly, he says, I felt my life and liberty were under threat. I realized there is a power that could make me do whatever it wanted, and I had to comply. He says that's when he started thinking about a different life. I sensed a bit of that shift when I first met Jim last year. It was in the middle of the lockdown. Some of us were allowed to mill around the block. Jim told me he wasn't that optimistic about the future. Then his friends piped up. Hey, one said to Jim, be careful with your complaining. But Jim said, it's fine. She's with the foreign media. It's okay for her to report what I'm saying. A willingness to speak to me, a journalist from a U.S. media outlet, that's new. Usually it's hard to interview people here. On June 1st, 2022, most of Shanghai was out of a lockdown. Some residents set off fireworks to celebrate, perhaps prematurely. It would take a further 6 months for zero COVID restrictions to be fully dropped. Jim says consumer spending did pick up after the restrictions were first lifted. But this year, he says, you could really feel the spending slowdown. Jim has also saved up enough to start up a food business. But when Chinese regulators went after Alibaba co-founder Jack Ma, he thought twice about being an entrepreneur. I'm sure Jack Ma was scared to death by the government investigations, says Jim. It felt like he was getting killed. Business-wise, he means. Add on the constant news about China's military exercises along the Taiwan Straits, plus tensions with the U.S., and Jim says for the first time in his life, he has no sense of security in China.
What can give me confidence? Just democracy and freedom.
Jim says he's worked his whole life to get to Shanghai. Now he's here and owns his own property. But he's willing to leave all that behind, just for a chance to start over in the West. It won't be easy. He might not get all his money out because China has capital controls. And we've heard Chinese immigration are asking people who leave a lot more questions. China will still be a powerful country, he says, no doubt. But its citizens will become weaker. Good luck. Good luck, I say, and shake his hand. Jim walks off. I hope he reaches out if and when he's abroad. In Shanghai, I'm Jennifer Pack for Marketplace.
Coming up.
It's really like a crazy idea to be like, hey, I want to be a typewriter salesman.
I mean, whatever pays the bills, right? First, though, let's do the numbers. Dow Industrial's off 74 points today, 0.2%, 33,433. The NASDAQ gained 88 points, about 2/3% there, closed at 13,307. The S&P 500 basically flat, 42 and 88. Tech stocks rallied today. Apple sweetened 1.5%. Amazon swelled 1.8% as UBS reiterated a buy rating on the online retailer. Facebook's parent company Meta picked up 2.2% today. Electric vehicle maker Tesla accelerated 0.5%. The company missed estimates for third quarter deliveries and said this was due to planned upgrades to its factories. So, of course, the stock went up. Rival Rivian dipped 2.5% today. Its third quarter deliveries beat estimates, but the EV maker failed to calm investors' concerns over its production costs. Railroad stock Norfolk Southern gave back 2.75% today on a downgrade from Bank of America, which cited, quote, continuing service issues. CSX off 0.7%. Union Pacific subtracted almost 0.5% today. Bond prices went down as well. That means the yield goes up 4.68% on the 10-year. You're listening to Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Amazon Business. From small business to big enterprise and everything in between, Amazon Business helps simplify the supplies buying process. Amazon Business, your partner for smart business buying. And by Fidelity. A dedicated Fidelity advisor can help create a wealth plan for a full financial picture. More at fidelity.com/wealth. Investment minimums apply. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC. And by Viking, dedicated to bringing travelers to the heart of each destination by river and ocean, offering cultural enrichment and immersive experiences on board and on shore. Viking.com.
WNYC is supported by Apple TV Plus, presenting lessons in chemistry. Brie Larson stars as Elizabeth Zott, a chemist who ends up with her own cooking show, proving life doesn't follow a formula, based on the novel by Bonnie Garmis. Streaming October 13th only on Apple TV Plus.
Justice Clarence Thomas is the most senior justice on the Supreme Court. Yet to many Americans, he's kind of an enigma.
Who would guess that this Reagan appointee is such an admirer of the famous black radical Malcolm X?
On More Perfect, we try to get inside the minds of the 9 justices. Next time, we'll meet Clarence X. Tune in to More Perfect, a special series from WNYC. Tonight at 8 on WNYC.
You're listening to Marketplace on WNYC. Coming up in the 7 o'clock hour of All Things Considered, we were drenched yet again by a major storm over this past weekend. What can we do to stop it from happening in the future? That and more at 7 o'clock.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kai Ryssdal. The beginning of October brings with it the end of the pandemic pause on student loan payments and interest accrual. It has, of course, been in the air for months now, that story has, with the subtext that millions of people having to start paying on those loans again is going to leave them less to spend elsewhere, which will be a rude awakening for them and for the broader economy, which has been riding the crest of the wave of all that consumer spending. But is it really going to be that big of a deal in an economy as big as this one is? Marketplace's Henry Epp did the digging.
Some 43 million Americans have student loan debt, but there are millions more who don't. So the impact on consumer spending might not be that big, says Sarah Foster, an analyst with Bankrate.
This might just be an instance of the broader economy maybe not taking a hit because of student loan payments, but a significant portion of the population feeling some pain on top of pain that they've already been feeling from inflation and rising interest rates.
In other words, these payments probably won't tip us into a recession, but millions of Americans will feel and think about the financial pinch, says Shannon Seary, an economist at Wells Fargo.
This is a monthly obligation, right, that households are now going to have to undertake in terms of they see the amount that's going out every month directed towards their student debt.
It's more of a drain on the mental side because you can't exhale and just be.
Curtis Chambers is a financial coach in Boston who owes about $45,000 on his college degree. That comes out to about $200 a month in payments, which is going to cut into his leisure budget.
You know, I like to get massages. I like to go with my daughter and get manicures and pedicures. We like to go out to eat.
Maybe, he says, that self-care spending will happen once a month now instead of twice. And if enough student loan borrowers pull back on massages and mani-pedis, that could kinda help the Federal Reserve slow down the economy, says Shannon Seary at Wells Fargo.
It is possible that this is something that could help them in terms of slowing inflation.
But it is certain to leave student loan borrowers with less money. Stephen Tansey of Barrie, Vermont just made his first ever payment on his loans after graduating during the pandemic. He also just replaced his broken computer and dropped $1,000 on car repairs.
If I went to the mechanic and they said, oh, you need another $500 worth, I'd be in a very tight situation right now because after, all this other money that got spent, I just don't have that much.
And with that $75 monthly payment, he says, there's just no wiggle room in his budget. I'm Henry App for Marketplace.
Strip malls, with all apologies to strip mall devotees, aren't many people's idea of enduring architecture. They can be unsightly, yes, but they are undeniably economically essential. Houston, Texas has its share of distinguished buildings and public spaces, of course, but it also, after 60 plus years of car-centric development, has strip malls in its DNA. Strip malls that are home to thousands of small businesses serving an increasingly diverse population. Marketplace's Elizabeth Troval has that one.
I get out of my car at a strip mall on Hillcroft Street, a 6-lane road that cuts through West Houston. It's actually really lively out here. There's a lot of foot traffic. Meeting me here is Jesus Vassallo, architect and Rice University professor, who calls this a pretty typical 2-story retail space. Simple, boxy, with a little flair, like white columns.
Spanish Revival, beige stucco, and ceramic tiles for the roofs.
There's an empanada place, a nail salon, a quinceañera dress shop.
So in the end, it's a very expedient thing that can be slapped together very quickly.
The street is lined with developments like this one.
There's a cacophony of signs, traffic lanes, hedges, and small buildings, right? And it just layers to a vibrant but chaotic environment.
This area is pretty typical of Houston, a driver's city with no zoning restrictions. Vassallo says it was once cheap farmland that was developed quickly by newcomers.
People were moving here from the Rust Belt to work in the oil and gas economy.
Greater Houston now has more than 1,800 retail strip buildings. That's hundreds more than LA or Chicago, according to real estate firm Colliers. Hannah Tosh is a retail analyst there.
Houston is one of America's most affordable and prosperous cities.
That means people have more disposable income, which is good for retail.
I mean, you could argue that means more to your average strip mall retailer than, an upscale shopping center.
It also means affordable retail spaces, which make it easier to go ahead and open up that halal grocery store or hookah bar. University of Houston economist Vikram Maheshwari says that benefits consumers, too.
We enjoy the fruits of all that variety here.
He also says the simple design of strip malls allows them to shapeshift as neighborhood demographics change.
You'll drive by a place and you'll think, that looks like it was a big box retailer, but now it's a wedding venue. Or that looks like it used to be a grocery store and now it's a mosque. And so I think that there's something very modular about strip malls. that allow them to sort of have second and third lives.
And some of these businesses last for decades. Back at the two-story strip mall, Iret Delgado has been running Marine's Empanadas for 33 years and has seen tenants come and go.
There used to be another Middle East food in the corner.
Her business has grown from 2 employees to 14. Rent has gone up a lot over the years, but she says she's stuck around because of her loyal customer base.
Yeah, and we got a nice parking lot, and the people come in and parking and get your food, and also we got a lot of office buildings, and they come in for lunch, for dinner.
Her Colombian comfort food is just one of the options on Hillcroft. There's also pupusas, biryani, pho, Jesus Pasalo again.
The type of vibrancy that you find in the local communities in Houston, it's really amazing, and it's partially because of the affordability and availability of spaces such as the strip malls.
They're not visually appealing, but they have value. And Houston is just one sprawling American city lined with these cement strips that consumers return to again and again. In Houston, I'm Elizabeth Choval for Marketplace.
There is a market for literally everything, even in or maybe because of this digital economy of ours. Here is today's installment of our series, My Economy.
My name is Aaron Farrell. I live in Los Angeles, California, and I'm a modern-day typewriter salesman. I started this business about 10 years ago. It started very organically, very randomly. I was taking the trash out one that I thought was a vintage suitcase by the dumpster. It happened to be a vintage typewriter that somebody was throwing away. It just sparked my interest as far as wanting to get to know about these machines, wanting to understand about them. From there, I started doing pop-ups around Los Angeles. There's a lot of different vintage markets out there. And so I did a vintage market and I gathered up all these typewriters. And I had about close to probably 30 machines. And at the end of the market, I sold every single typewriter that I brought out. So that's when it really hit me that there's still purpose for these things. Being in Los Angeles, it's a very creative city. So the nice thing about that is I always have this steady stream of artists, and it allows me to grow this business in different ways. So I have this storefront downtown in the arts district, but I also do a lot of pop-ups throughout the years. I work with a lot of poets, a lot of screenwriters. A lot of times, I get people that just want to have a moment and disconnect. And a typewriter allows you to do that. You can't delete. You can't get on the internet with it. It just does one thing. It just transcribes your thoughts. That's it. We move so quickly nowadays, with technology. It's everybody's looking at their screen or, just on the computer, or on the phone. Tech has just moved so quickly that people are missing and wanting that need for kind of a slower pace. A lot of people just want that feel of nostalgia. It's really a crazy idea to be hey, I want to be a typewriter salesman. I never thought that in a million years I would be doing anything with typewriters. But my whole goal and everything is to preserve history and to preserve these machines. That's my goal, is just to get people excited about these machines because they still hold purpose,
Aaron Farrell, he owns the Typewriter Connection here in Los Angeles. Call, email, or old-fashioned letter written maybe on a refurbished typewriter. Let us know what's going on with you. Marketplace.org is where you can start. This final note on the way out today, I imagine the appeal of this one might be limited, but if anybody's interested, it's going to be the listeners to this program. If you have abandoned Elon Musk's social media site, never fear.
Hi, I'm Jay Powell. I'm the chair of the Federal Reserve, and I want you to know that the Federal Reserve is now on Instagram and Threads.
That's a video the Fed chair put up today, but wait, that's not all.
October is National Economic Education Month, and throughout the month and beyond, we'll be posting here with information, links to events, and other resources about how Fed decisions affect you, your family, and your community.
Come on, doesn't get any better than that, right?
Marketplace is supported by Betterment, the automated investing platform that helps make it easy to be invested for the long term. Learn more at betterment.com. Investing involves risk. And by C3 AI. C3 Generative AI provides ChatGPT enterprise search that is verifiable, secure, and accurate across all enterprise data. C3.ai. This is Enterprise AI.
All right, off we go. Here, though, is your moment of economic context. There's a company out there called InTouch Insight that does a study every year of fast food drive-thrus, specifically how long we spend waiting in them, those lines. Average total time this year in the drive-thru, 29 seconds shorter than last year. Progress. Our daily production team includes Andy Corbin, Richard Cunningham, Maria Hollenhorst, Sarah Leeson, Sean McHenry, and Sophia Terenzio. I'm Kai Risdall. We will see you tomorrow, everybody. This is 8 p.m.